It was supposed to be just a simple party, nothing too big. I had invited a few close friends over to celebrate the end of a stressful week at college. My house was small but perfect for gatherings like this, and the plan was to keep things under control. Music, drinks, and some people hanging out in the backyard. The night started off fine, filled with laughter and conversation. But at some point, I noticed something strange. The door to the guest room, which I was sure I had locked before the party, was open. I tried to brush off the uneasiness, assuming someone must have gone in by accident. Yet as the night went on, my curiosity began to eat at me. While everyone was distracted in the living room, I decided to investigate. I slowly opened the door, expecting to find nothing but clutter or maybe a guest who had too much to drink taking a break. But what I saw made me freeze. The room was quiet, but it was clear someone had been there. A blanket was strewn across the floor, surrounded by food wrappers and empty water bottles. More disturbingly, there was a pile of clothes I didn't recognize. Beside it lay a small black notebook, open with a pen resting on the page. My hands trembled as I picked up the notebook and began to read. What I found inside was more unsettling than I could have ever imagined. The first few pages seemed normal, filled with random notes or what looked like a personal journal. But as I flipped through, the tone shifted dramatically. The entries began to describe details about my house, things no one else could have known. The creak of the back door when it opened, the time I usually got home from college, and even the shows I watched on TV before bed. My heart pounded as I reached a page that read, "He always locks the guest room door but doesn't notice the unlocked window. Someone had been living in my house, and I had no idea." The notes were meticulous, almost obsessive, detailing not just my habits but also those of the people who visited me. One entry mentioned the party that night, meaning whoever wrote it was there now. Lots of guests tonight. Some seem vulnerable, especially the girl in the blue dress. I need to choose carefully. Panic surged through me. Who was this person? And what did they mean by choose carefully? Clutching the notebook, I left the room, trying to stay calm even though my thoughts were racing. Back in the living room, my guests were laughing and chatting, completely oblivious to what I just discovered. I scanned the crowd, searching for someone who didn't belong, but everyone looked normal, and that made it even more terrifying. I knew I had to act, but I didn't want to alarm anyone. Pretending I had to take a call, I stepped into the backyard and called my friend Lucas, who was inside and someone I trusted completely. I told him to meet me outside without drawing attention. When he arrived, I showed him the notebook and quickly explained what I had found. His face turned pale as he flipped through the pages. "Is this someone here right now?" he whispered. I nodded. We agreed that the best course of action was to end the party as quickly and discreetly as possible to avoid panic. While Lucas subtly began signaling that the party was winding down, I went back inside to observe for any suspicious behavior. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. Near the kitchen, close to the hallway entrance, a figure was standing partially hidden in the shadows. I didn't recognize them immediately, and when I tried to approach, they slipped down the hall. I called out, "Hey, can I help you with something?" But they were already gone. I looked around but saw no sign of them. When I returned to the living room, Lucas was wrapping things up, and people were starting to leave one by one. Still, the feeling that someone was hiding in the house wouldn't go away. When the last guest finally left, Lucas and I locked the doors and began searching every room, determined to find the intruder. We started with the obvious, the guest room. It looked exactly as I had left it after finding the notebook, but now it felt even more sinister. The blanket on the floor and the food wrappers were chilling reminders of someone's prolonged presence in my home. We checked the closet, under the bed, and even the unlocked window mentioned in the notebook, but found nothing. "Maybe they fled when they realized you found the notebook," Lucas suggested, though the uncertainty in his voice was clear. We moved on to the other rooms, checking every corner and behind every piece of furniture. With every step, the oppressive feeling of being watched grew stronger, but we still found nothing. When we reached the upstairs hallway, something caught my eye. The attic door, which was usually locked, was slightly ajar. I exchanged a glance with Lucas, and we both understood. Slowly, We climbed the attic stairs, my phone flashlight illuminating the way. The air was colder up there, and the musty smell was overwhelming. At first glance, the space appeared empty, but in one corner, a large sheet was draped over something. Lucas and I exchanged a nervous look before pulling it back. Beneath it was a pile of clothes and blankets that had clearly been used recently. Among them was a small clock I recognized as mine. It had gone missing weeks earlier. It was clear whoever it was had been using my house as a hideout. As we searched further, the silence of the attic felt deafening. Lucas was on the other side of the space, looking behind a stack of boxes, when he suddenly stopped and called my name, his voice low and tense. I walked over to him and he held up something small, a portable camera. It was old and worn, but still functional. Next to it was a pile of VHS tapes, some labeled with dates. One tape had the word "party" scrawled on it. My stomach turned. I picked up one of the tapes and saw that the date matched a night I had been home alone weeks earlier. Whoever this person was, they had been documenting everything. Lucas suggested we leave the attic and call the police immediately, but I hesitated. A part of me needed to understand what was happening before involving others. I turned on the camera and realized it still had battery power. The most recent recording was from that night, just a few hours earlier. My hand trembled as I pressed play. The footage showed the living room of my house, dimly lit, with the camera moving slowly and deliberately, as if someone were carefully exploring the space in the dark. At one point, the camera turned toward me, standing at the counter, setting up drinks for the party. The recording cut off abruptly, but it was enough. The intruder had been inside the house while I was preparing for the guests. Shaking, I turned off the camera. Lucas and I rushed down from the attic, locking the door behind us. I called the police, explaining everything we'd found, my voice shaking as panic began to take over. While we waited, the silence in the house felt heavier than ever, as if someone, or something, was still lurking. The police arrived quickly and began searching every room with flashlights and weapons drawn. I led them to the attic and showed them the evidence: the notebook, the tapes, and the camera. They confiscated everything but found no sign of the intruder. When the police reviewed the external security cameras, they finally found a clue. The footage showed a man slipping out through the back door during the party, just moments before I discovered the open guest room. He moved calmly, almost casually, as though confident no one would notice. His face was covered, but his posture and movements seemed calculated. The police concluded that he had been hiding in the house for weeks, observing me and planning his next move. They believed he had intended to act during the party but fled when I discovered the notebook. Even after changing the locks and installing new security measures, the sense of safety in my own home was shattered. The tapes revealed weeks of recordings, including footage of me sleeping and going about my daily routine, completely unaware. Knowing he had been so close, watching and waiting, still haunts me. My home, once my sanctuary, became a place filled with unease, and I haven't truly felt at peace there since. The party was in full swing, with loud music, laughter, and people scattered throughout the house. It was the kind of gathering where nobody really knew everyone, but that didn't matter. Being there was enough to have a good time. As the host, I was busy making sure everything was under control. Enough drinks, food placed strategically around the house, and no looming disasters. It was at some point during the night that I noticed her for the first time. She was sitting in a corner of the living room, holding a cup that seemed untouched. She avoided eye contact and looked nervous, as if she were waiting for something. I asked a few friends who she was, but no one seemed to know for sure. Maybe she came with someone, one of them suggested. It struck me as odd, but with so many people around, I didn't think much of it at the time. As the party continued, she stayed in the same spot, almost as if she wanted to blend into the background. A few people tried to talk to her, but she gave short answers and quickly pulled away, returning to her corner. When the music began to wind down and guests started leaving, I realized I hadn't seen her for a while. I assumed she had left with the others. It wasn't until I was cleaning up gathering empty cups and tidying the mess, that I noticed something unusual. On one of the chairs was a bag I didn't recognize. I rummaged through it to find some form of ID and came across her driver's license. The name and photo weren't familiar, but what really unsettled me was what else I found inside. A handwritten note that read, "Please don't find me." That note sent a chill down my spine. It was clear something was wrong, but I had no idea what to do. I called a few friends who were still awake, asking if anyone remembered seeing the girl leave the party. Nobody was sure. One friend mentioned thinking she had left early, but no one could confirm it. I decided to wait until morning to dig deeper. As I continued cleaning, I couldn't shake the memory of her expression throughout the night. That constant glance toward the door, as if she were waiting for someone or dreading what might happen. The next morning, I took the bag to the local police station, along with the note I had found. I explained the situation to the officer on duty, who began asking questions. Who were the guests at the party? Had anyone acted suspiciously, or had I noticed anything unusual beyond the girl? When I mentioned that no one seemed to know who she was or who she had come with, his demeanor shifted. He asked me to stay while they ran her identity. A few hours later, I received a call. The police had identified the girl, but what they told me was even more disturbing. She had been reported missing 2 days before she showed up at my party, and it appeared she was running from someone. The note in her bag now made perfect sense. She was scared of being found. What happened next completely changed the tone of the situation. The police began treating the case seriously and sent a team to my house to inspect the area. They asked if anyone suspicious had shown up at the party or if anything unusual had occurred. I reiterated that the girl had seemed isolated and anxious, but that no one had seen who she knew there. Meanwhile, they started digging into her background. They discovered she had left a nearby town a few days earlier, leaving behind a history of domestic violence reports against an ex-boyfriend. This man was now under suspicion of having followed her, and everything pointed to her trying to hide. Things took a darker turn when the police reviewed street surveillance footage. One of the cameras had captured a car parked near my house during the party. The vehicle didn't belong to any of my guests, and the license plate was traced back to the girl's ex-boyfriend. The footage showed the car parked for hours with its lights off. Shortly after most of the guests had left, the man was seen leaving the car and walking toward the house. The timing aligned exactly with when I noticed the girl was no longer there. Guilt began to weigh on me. She had sought refuge at the party, and it seemed he had found her before she could escape. The discovery of the car and its connection to the ex-boyfriend escalated the case. The police intensified their search for the girl, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have done more to help her. The encounter had seemed so casual, so easy to overlook, but now I realized she had been asking for help in the only way she could. 2 days later, a report came in. The police had found the car abandoned in a rural area about 30 miles from the city. Nearby, they discovered signs of a struggle, and further down a clearing, the body of the ex-boyfriend was found. He had died violently, but there was no sign of the girl, only tracks in the dirt suggesting she might have fled. The case left more questions than answers. The police concluded that the young woman likely acted in self-defense, but her whereabouts remained unknown. For weeks, I waited for news, some update that would confirm she was safe. Even now, when I think about that night, I get chills remembering her expression. The way she seemed to be searching for safety amidst the chaos of the party. She left a lasting impression that I can't shake, and to this day, I wonder if she found the freedom she was desperately seeking, or if she's still out there, running from a shadow that refuses to fade. The party started like any other high school house party. My parents were out of town visiting relatives, and I took the opportunity to invite a few friends over. At first, everything was going smoothly. Loud music, people scattered throughout the house, and occasional laughter coming from the backyard. It was the kind of party that quickly got out of control, with uninvited guests showing up, brought along by friends of friends. I decided to let it slide, as long as nothing got broken and the house didn't end up trashed. But in the middle of the crowd, I noticed a man who seemed out of place. He was standing in the corner of the living room, holding a plastic cup, watching everyone. I didn't recognize him, but I assumed he was someone's older brother tagging along with a younger friend. I passed by him a few times, trying to figure out who he was. He didn't seem threatening, but there was something unsettling about his behavior. While everyone else was talking and having a good time, he stayed silent, scanning the room as if he were studying it. I asked a few friends if they knew him, but nobody did. Maybe he came with the seniors, one of them suggested. I decided not to worry too much, thinking he'd leave when the party wound down. But as the night went on, he was still there, walking around the house, hovering near different groups but never really joining the conversation. That's when I started to feel like something was off. As the party continued, I kept an eye on him. At one point, I saw him in the kitchen, rummaging through the drawer where my parents kept the silverware. When I approached, he quickly closed it and smiled, saying, "I was just looking for a bottle opener." I didn't question it at the time, but the way he acted felt strange, almost like he was hiding something. A little later, I spotted him upstairs, even though I had made it clear that no one was supposed to go up there, and I had locked all the bedrooms. He was standing in the hallway, staring at the door to my room. When I asked him what he was doing, he shrugged and walked back downstairs without a word. His behavior was starting to make me uneasy, but with so many people in the house, I felt powerless to confront him directly. Then things took a turn for the worse. A friend came up to me and asked, "Who's that weird guy in the backyard?" "He's been standing by the fence for a while." I went outside to check, and sure enough, he was there, staring into the darkness beyond the fence, as if waiting for something. That was the last straw. I walked up to him and firmly told him that the party was for friends only and that he needed to leave. He stared at me for a moment, far too long, then gave me that same uncomfortable smile and left through the side of the house without protest. I thought that was the end of it, but when I went back inside, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. The pantry door was slightly ajar, and inside was a large knife that didn't belong there. It was one of the biggest knives from the kitchen drawer. He had taken it out. Finding that knife sent my mind racing. It was clear that the man wasn't just some random guest. I put the knife back in its place, trying not to alarm anyone, but the sense of danger was overwhelming. As the party wound down and guests started to leave, I went through the house, locking doors and windows to make sure everything was secure. When the last person left, I sat alone in the living room, trying to process what had just happened. That's when one of my friends, who had stayed behind to help clean up, said something that made my blood run cold. "That guy, I think I've seen him before. Doesn't he live at the end of the street?" Suddenly, everything began to click. I pressed my friend for more information, and he told me the man had a reputation for being strange. There were stories about him wandering through backyards or peeking into windows at night. Once, he had been arrested for trespassing but was released due to a lack of evidence. And now he had been in my backyard, in my house, mingling with my friends. The thought that he knew where I lived and could come back was terrifying. I decided to call the police, even though he was already gone, just to document the incident. As I explained everything to the dispatcher, it hit me how easily he had blended in without anyone questioning his presence. The police arrived about 20 minutes later and listened carefully to my account. As I showed them where the man had been and explained the situation with the knife, they began asking questions. How he got in, who might have brought him, and whether anyone at the party knew him. All I could say was that he seemed to have been there from the start, moving through the house as if he belonged. One of the officers mentioned that they were familiar with him and that there had been reports of suspicious behavior in the area, including break-ins. The realization that he might have been watching my house, waiting for an opportunity, was deeply unsettling. The days that followed were tense. I checked the locks on the house multiple times a day and installed security cameras with my parents' help when they returned home. The police promised to patrol the neighborhood more frequently, but the sense of vulnerability lingered. I never saw the man again, but knowing how close he had come, not just to me but to my friends, still haunts me. He had blended in so effortlessly, taking advantage of the chaos of a party, and nobody realized how dangerous he was until it was too late. Since that night, I've been far more cautious about who I let into my home, and parties haven't felt the same since.